So good morning. My name is Georgia Farouk. I'm the Executive Director of Thrive, the Alliance of Nonprofits for San Mateo County, joined by my team members today, Petra Silton, who is now our Senior Director of Programs, Kirsten Shedek, our Programs and Operations Manager. Yahaira Ortega is here today as well, who is our Policy and Advocacy Associate. And I think Letitia Manuel, our Marketing Associate, is somewhere on the call as well today, behind the scenes. So thank you to the team members that are attending. Thank you to all of you for making time this day 2 of summer morning, and hope you all are staying cool. So Thrive is the Alliance of Nonprofits for San Mateo County, and one of our kind of activities these last several months, this last year and a half, has really been working with all of you to learn more about all of the funding that has been available through the American Recovery Plan Act. And I wanted to thank a couple of key players in that. So wanted to thank the County of San Mateo for working closely with us, the County Manager's Office, as well as the Packard Foundation, who has funded, the Packard Foundation for the last 15 months has funded our work around ARPA education and advocacy. And we've had a series of events. The most recent one was with the Palo Alto Community Fund. Palo Alto Community Fund funds nonprofits in both Santa Clara County and San Mateo County. And so we are committed to continuing this conversation and hopefully providing some good resources. Most recently, the Board of Supervisors met, and there were updates on the ARPA funding. Some of you were in attendance, some of you were not, so you will get updated today. But really today is about having, yes, the update, but also a conversation with all of you about any questions you may have about the upcoming process with available ARPA funds. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to our Senior Director of Programs, Petra Silton, who will walk through a little bit of Thrive's upcoming programs and also introduce our speaker and facilitate the conversation today. Petra, thanks.
Good morning, everybody. I would love it if everybody would introduce themselves on chat. Let us know what your organization is, and in honor of it being the second day of summer, let us know what your favorite ice cream flavor is. So for the program today, we'll have an hour with Peggy Jensen. So she'll do her presentation, and then after that, we'll have lots of time for Q&A, and you can put your questions either in the chat or you can raise your virtual hand and we'll call on you. I'd love to tell you about some of the exciting things that are coming up. So first of all, Tracy, do you have a question now already?
Yes, I was going to introduce myself in chat, but it looks like only direct messaging to the hosts is enabled. So I don't know if you wanted to set that up for everyone or not.
I would like to do that. I will try to figure that out in just a minute. So thank you for letting me know.
Tracy, our team will work on that behind the scenes. Okay, there we go.
Thank you. Okay, great.
Good job.
Appreciate it. So great segue, because the first event that I wanted to talk about, Tracy is one of our featured speakers. So we are doing an event where we're taking both our Environment and Sustainability Thrive Action Group and our Basic Needs and Safety Net Group together, because we're going to be talking about food waste reduction and recovery. So it hits both of those. And it's on June 30th, and we're doing it in person. There is an option to Zoom in, but we're really excited about actually being in person. We have a fantastic slate of speakers who are going to talk about how some new legislation really makes it easier for food recovery and makes the food producers more, gives them incentive. They will actually have to make sure that more of their food is recovered, which is going to be a big advantage for nonprofits who recover food. So I hope we can join you for, I hope you can join us for that at Redwood City at this CZI community space. Next, we have a Thrive resource room. We do these every other month, and each time we have a different theme, and it's the this time it's going to be about jobs and entrepreneurship. So we have somebody from NovaWorks coming to speak, somebody from Renaissance Entrepreneurship Center, and somebody from Futuro Health, which is a new program that provides tuition-free training for people who want to be in the healthcare field. So fantastic program. Come to the Thrive Resource Room to find out about that. That's in July 12th. And next, we are getting our arts group back together. It's been a little while. We're very excited. This is going to also be in person, again, with an option to Zoom in, but it's going to be a lunch. And we're sponsoring it with the County Office of Arts and Culture. We hope to see you there if you're at all interested in arts and culture in San Mateo. Next. And then our Voter Education and Outreach Advisory Committee, I'm sure you all noticed, we just had an election. Although we had quite low turnout, we had better turnout than a lot of other counties and significantly better than the state as a whole. But we want to continue increasing voter turnout, especially for the people in our county who are least represented. So come and hear about what the efforts are from many different nonprofits who are working on this, and join us in that effort. And then all this year, we have been doing Wellness Wednesdays. And so our next one is Attitude of Gratitude. And I'm sure that you and your staff would be interested in coming and exercising your gratitude muscles. So we have a couple other things coming up that I want to tell you about. One that's in September, we're going to be doing partnerships in education with the San Mateo County Office of Ed and CBOs who are working on different aspects of education to build the relationships. And the second one is in October, we're going to be doing the first annual San Mateo County Climate Summit. And we are hosting that with Nuestra Casa, Climate Resilient Communities, Rise South City, and ourselves, and we hope to see you there as well. So lots of exciting things coming up. If you're not on our newsletter, please sign up to be on our newsletter. If you're not a member, please become a member. And with that, sorry, that was kind of a long Thrive commercial. We have a lot of exciting stuff coming up. But today we're really here to hear from Peggy Jensen, to hear about the ARPA funds, and then to have a discussion. So we look forward to taking your questions at the end, and we'll have Peggy start with her presentation.
Great, thank you very much, Petra and Georgia. My appreciation for inviting me today to share the information around the ARPA funds and the action that the board has taken so far. In looking at the chat, I realized that many of our partners, many of the folks we worked with who on distributing these ARPA funds, getting resources out to the community in need, are here today. So shout out to all of you who've been partners, and potential opportunities to partner with others of you going forward. So if you could put up the first slide, please. Okay, so I'd like to review today, as Georgia said, the action that the board has taken on the ARPA funds. This is a presentation essentially that was given to the Board of Supervisors earlier this year, about a month and a half ago. Many of you may have seen it. I'll be providing a little bit of an update on what's been done since then. But really this, as Georgia said, this is an opportunity for you to ask questions, and hopefully I'll have some answers, but if not, I'll certainly get back to Georgia and Petra and the team, and they can share those answers with you. Next slide, please. So just a little bit of background to start. The San Mateo County received about $150 million. It was allocated about $150 million in American Rescue Act ARPA funding. Those monies have come to the county in two payments about a year ago. In May of 2021, we received our first 50% payment, and we recently received our second 50% payment of just under $75 million. In terms of the requirements by the federal government, the funds must be incurred, which means obligated. We have to commit them. They have to be under contract by December 31st, 2024. So a little more than 2 years from now. And they must be spent. They must be out the door and accounted for by December 21st, 2026. Next slide, please. So for all of our ARPA funds, and in fact, going back to the beginning of the federal allocation plan, or the federal funding support for the pandemic, back to the CARES funds in 2020, the county has used 4 guiding principles to do the allocation. The first and foremost is aligning the expenditure plan, the allocation plan, with community priorities and needs. And as many of you all may have participated in back at the beginning of the pandemic in the spring and summer of 2020, we engaged over 300 community members in a variety of work groups to come together and say, what are our county priorities? What are the things that we need to work on together to make San Mateo County a better place post-pandemic? Those priorities were updated this past winter in a collaboration with the Gardner Center at Stanford. Gardner and Shireen Malakapazi, our Chief Equity Officer, worked together to really target our most impacted communities to identify what their current priorities were. And what we found was that those priorities really hadn't changed, that the highest concern, the area of highest concern and most need was housing. There was also high concern around food security, interest in childcare, interest in workforce development and getting better jobs, and also mental health. Anxiety, not necessarily mental health needing counseling, but just general anxiety about how do you meet our basic needs for our families. So key focus has been on on funding and directing funds to meet community priorities and needs. In addition, an equally important and related area and focus area was advancing equity and helping those most impacted by the pandemic. In fact, the federal guidelines for the distribution in ARPA funds specify that one of the criteria is really focusing on meeting the needs of those most impacted by the pandemic, whether it's individuals, households, families, small businesses, focusing on those folks that have been most impacted. Another priority for the county has been contributing to improve physical and mental well-being. And then finally, our approach has been to not put a lot of money into an area that hasn't been thoroughly vetted, but to essentially use a test and learn approach, involving a bunch of pilot projects and then seeing what has been best received by the community and what has developed the best results, and then using additional funds to expand those programs that have been successful. Next slide, please. So a little bit of overview on where the dollars have been spent. So through May of 2022, without the second tranche of the ARPA funds, this chart shows you how the funds have been allocated, how the funds that the county has received have been allocated. It includes all the different types of funding that has been available for recovery work, starting with some Measure K dollars that the board put forward early in the pandemic, the initial tranche of federal funding, which was CARES money. Much of the county funds was leveraged locally. We had a variety of investments made by philanthropy in the county, by cities, by private donors, and that's the little gray lines that you can see. State contributed a significant amount of money, particularly around housing through the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, ERAP, and under vulnerable populations, that large state contribution was primarily the Great Plates program that provided food assistance in collaboration with our restaurants. And then finally, you can see how the ARPA money was distributed, the top bar, the darker bar. But what this shows is that the top priorities that were identified by our community, housing and then assistance for our vulnerable populations, including focus on food and other supports, that's where the majority of the county, the Board of Supervisors and our community partners have put their recovery funds. Next slide, please. So with the second tranche of ARPA funds, what you can see is that we're up to almost $360 million in recovery funds. And that allocation, that distribution of funds based upon community priorities has remained the same. Next slide, please. So another way to share this information, show you the percent distribution of our second tranche of ARPA funds. The majority of that has been for emerging issues. Essentially, that means that it's being held by the county. We haven't made specific allocations yet for about 39% of those funds. Second largest area has been around housing. 33% of that money has gone to housing. A large percentage is going to children and families. Significant dollars for vulnerable populations, economic recovery, and some infrastructure. And I'm going to get into the details on how this money has been allocated in these specific categories in a minute. Next slide, please. Just another way to share this information about our second tranche, the $75 million plus or minus, $24 million for housing, $9 million for children and families, $5 million for economic recovery, 3.5 for vulnerable population support, another 3.5 for infrastructure, and then that money that we've held aside unallocated for emerging issues is almost $29 million. Next slide, please. So how's the money been distributed and what action has the board taken? So starting with housing, the largest allocation area of about almost $24.5 million. If we go back to the prior slide, please. Okay, I think maybe we jumped ahead. At any rate, for $24.5 million, there we go. There, that one, perfect, thank you. So the investments in housing have been focused on preventing homelessness, unlocking land to essentially create more housing development opportunities, affordable housing development opportunities in the county, and also creating new affordable housing options. How do we support the development of more affordable housing options? About a total of $6 million in allocations was approved by the board when they met in May and considered this second tranche allocation. And 2 of those approved items, $4 million of that $6 million, are represented on this slide. To address the high priority needs around housing, the board approved $2 million to contribute to our emergency rent, utilities, and transportation assistance program. That program has been run for many years by the Samaritan House and is operated by our core services agencies. An additional $2 million was approved by the board for eviction counseling and legal representation for renters, again, to prevent homelessness. We have had ongoing contracts for multiple years with Legal Aid and the East Palo Alto Community Law Project to provide these services. Next slide, please. In addition, in terms of how do we help develop affordable housing, what can we do not just to respond to the immediate needs, but how do we develop the infrastructure to address existing problems or existing challenges long-term? There was about $500,000 set aside to pilot a number of projects. The first was creation of an accessory dwelling unit help center. We're working with our 21 Elements partners, Barrett and Driscoll, on a model that they've implemented in Sonoma and Napa counties around helping people develop second units. We also know that our smaller sized cities and also our school districts and faith communities are interested in developing affordable housing, but just don't have the technical expertise available to them. So we've set aside $125,000 to develop a plan to both provide assistance around housing to both of those groups, small and mid-sized cities, and also school districts in the faith community. Next slide, please. And then our final component around housing is that we set aside $20 million, the largest chunk of money, for emerging housing needs that could possibly be used for projects related to ending homelessness. It could be part of our affordable housing fund to develop and buy down the costs of affordable housing of different types, maybe supportive housing. At this point, we're working very closely with our Department of Housing on how this might be used, and also with our human services agencies related to the work they're doing around ending homelessness. Next slide, please. Children and families was the next large category. $9.1 million was set aside. The majority of that, about a little over $4 million, was approved in concept by the board to provide grants for our child care centers and also our family daycare providers, whom we know have been very challenged throughout the pandemic. We're working closely with the 4 Cs, First 5, and the agenda item for the board to approve this program will be coming to the board toward the end of July. Included in the package for children and families is also a $100,000 grant for technical assistance for the Build Up program to focus on assisting, promoting the development of child care centers throughout the county. Next slide, please. In addition to that, we know that there's going to be ongoing need for support services for after school programs, and also we expect into the summer of 2023. As many of you may know, the county issued almost a little over $3 million in grants to summer enrichment programs that are currently operating throughout the county. And the funding that is included in the second tranche will allow us to continue that support to programs that assist the children in our high impacted communities through this coming school year and through next summer. We will be coming back to the Board of Supervisors also at the end of July to lay out the plan and get approval for a $2.5 million investment in school year enrichment programs. Next slide, please. Turning to economic recovery, $5 million was set aside for 2 very exciting projects. We are going to be looking at developing a small business and job seeker center, two of these facilities, one in North Fair Oaks in the unincorporated area to serve that community and neighboring areas, and then another on the coast side, hosted in the city of Half Moon Bay. These job seeker and small business centers are based on a model that's been very successful, that's been developed by the city of South San Francisco. South City calls their program an economic advancement center, but it's helped over many, many small businesses, entrepreneurs, develop their business plans, improve their approach to business, and also just help them launch and consider what their business might be looking like. That center also, and actually that small business support is through a contract with the Renaissance Entrepreneurship Center. The center also provides support for job seekers through a contract with Job Train, helping people with resumes, helping them focus on what areas they want to transition to in terms of new job. And they've helped over 100 people there. So it's a model that's been proven to be successful. It's a concept of our test and learn approach. And we look forward to working with the residents of North Fair Oaks and our coastsiders in the city of Half Moon Bay on developing 2 additional facilities in those 2 communities. Next slide, please. Turning to vulnerable population support, and the final $2 million of that $6 million that the board approved in May was a grant to Second Harvest Food Bank to continue the wonderful work they've been doing in addressing food insecurity in the county. Through ongoing conversations with Tracy Weatherby and others, we know that needs have not gone down. They've been exacerbated by the rising costs due to inflation. And so the board was committed to continuing to provide support for food security. In addition, $1 million was set aside for financial assistance to unincorporated area residents. This is something we're currently piloting on the coast side with Puente and Coastside Hope. We're awaiting the results of that program, and based upon what we see from that and the needs that are identified, we've set aside potentially $1 million that could go to expand that program. And then finally, we also set aside $500,000 for a full service community outreach pilot program. What we've learned through the Gardner Center work, the input or the surveys and the focus groups that the Gardner Center conducted with our most impacted community members, that we need to improve our outreach to the communities. We need to make sure that people know that the programs are available, how to apply for them, and assist in those applications through appropriate language services, through technology assistance, through a variety of means. This money has not been specifically allocated, but we know that there is a need in that area, and we anticipate developing a program, working with all of our partners to put that together in the coming months. Next slide, please. Finally, infrastructure. During the pandemic, actually way back in 2020, the county expanded our public Wi-Fi sites from 100 sites to almost 400 sites. We had about 300 sites. Those sites were identified with the assistance of our school district partners to focus on the neighborhoods where children and families didn't have access to Wi-Fi. They couldn't do distance learning. There's a cost associated with operating and maintaining those public Wi-Fi sites. And this $3.5 million is set aside to help us transition to cover those costs for a period of time until we develop an ongoing operating plan for those public Wi-Fi sites. We continue to see high use of those facilities. In fact, I think the last note, there's been over 13,000 people contacting using the public Wi-Fi facilities a month, starting, well, actually from when we put them in and going forward. Next slide, please. And then finally, just under $29 million has been unallocated for needs to be determined, as I mentioned before. It could go into any one of these areas that we talked about, and it's set aside to determine, and it's been set aside so that we can see, all right, how are we emerging from the pandemic? Where are the ongoing needs? Where are the issues we need to focus on? The board will be considering how this money might be spent at a later date. There's no specific plan to date. But at this point, we would commit to sharing with you, to sharing with Georgia and your team, any upcoming plans for discussion of how these funds might be spent with the board. Next slide. So this is a slide essentially just for you to look at when it's distributed. It's a summary of all the different projects that I just went through. Next slide, please. And again, this is just a summary slide to show you how the funds have been distributed for all of our ARPA funds, the $150 million, housing, vulnerable populations, significant funds for county fiscal and health priorities, including all the work we've done around vaccination outreach, testing support, and then the smaller numbers around infrastructure and unallocated for emerging issues. Next slide. That ends my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer questions.
Peggy, thank you so much for that presentation. We really appreciate how much time you take to inform all of us how this is working, because it's complicated, but it's also a lot of money, and we appreciate the communication. I'd love to open it up for questions.
We had a couple in the chat as well. We have one from Chris. Feel free. I don't see anything else with your name, but I don't know the last name. But what exactly is invested to prevent homelessness? So specifically, it sounds like there's, the housing piece has been clarified, but around the homelessness piece, can you provide further detail?
So was the question prevention of homelessness or response to homelessness?
It looks like prevention. Yeah.
Prevention. Okay. Yeah. The county, through a variety of funding sources, federal money, state money, has invested millions of dollars in homelessness in addressing homelessness, but specifically for homelessness prevention. State monies, the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. Last time I saw the data, we have had $92 million approved for emergency rental assistance for San Mateo County residents. The state has been not as efficient as we had hoped in getting that money out because there are a number of applications that are still pending. We anticipate that total amount may go to around $150 million approved in the county. So significant funds. The county supplemented that state program by giving over $1 million to our core service providers so that they could provide supplemental staff to do engagement and outreach and help people apply for that program. We had a significant number of applications. I think as a percentage of our total population, it was quite high. So significant, lots of money to assist with rental funds. The $2 million that I mentioned for the county assistance program, that's separate from the state ERAP program. That total is about $18 million for rental assistance for county residents. County has put in about $7 million of that funds, but our foundations, cities, private donors, and others have also having contributed to that. So it's lots and lots of money for rental assistance to prevent homelessness. I think the other component is what we talked about, the legal aid and helping tenants know what sorts of resources and what their rights are. So significant investment there also.
Great. And then it looks like Chris wants to do a quick follow-up live to their question. So feel free to jump in, Chris, before we move on to the next one.
Yeah, thank you so much. One thing that I wanted to ask about was the investment made or allocated to substance abuse programs or mental health programs, because the data continues to show that the vast majority of the homeless population, I think 80% at last data collection, and that's probably an underrepresentation, have some sort of underlying substance use disorder or mental health disorder, and more generally, a combination of the two. And so I think certainly an investment into programs that address these substance use disorders and these mental health disorders is one step necessary to tackling the overarching problem, which is homelessness. And so just wondering what kind of funds, if any, have been allocated to those types of programs so these individuals who are homeless can perhaps treat some of the underlying drivers that are creating the issue, so to speak.
Chris, thank you very much for that question. We recognize the point you're making. We know that a significant percentage of our homeless residents have alcohol or other drug issues and have invested a significant amount of money. I don't have those dollars off the top of my head, but I can tell you, I was on a call yesterday with our health staff and our behavioral health and recovery team, and they have lots and lots of programs that are going on to provide assistance, and they're developing a plan that we're very excited about, that will support that will expand the services that are currently provided in the county to assist those who need mental health and AOD type needs.
Great. Thank you so much for your feedback. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lisa Taylor has a question.
Peggy, thank you for that presentation. I did have a question about the unallocated $29 million. Is there a time frame when those funds need to be spent?
Thanks, Lisa, for that question. The money has to be allocated in the sense that we have to have it under contract by December of 2024. So we have some time to do that. It has to be spent by 2026. So there is time. I think that, we had hoped, as we had all hoped, that we would be not having to deal with these ongoing surges in the pandemic. And we'd hope we'd be able to develop a plan at this point that would lay out, this is how we wanted to spend all the money. But given the uncertainty and this ongoing fluctuation in the pandemic and the impact it's having on businesses, on families, on childcare, we wanted to hold some money aside to see, I don't exactly know when it's going to be, but probably within the next 9 to 10 months or so, we'll be coming back with another plan with how we might allocate those additional funds. The other thing that we may do is do a follow-up of the work we did with Gardner to see, all right, are we still on track with the same priorities in the community? Make sure that the things we've been hearing all along are still consistent. What I heard yesterday from, we recently completed an immigrant survey, huge number of participation, really excited about that. And at a very high level, we're seeing consistent concerns across the communities, which reinforce our investments in housing, in vulnerable populations, and food security. But we probably want to update that too, just to make sure.
Great, thank you, Peggy. And again, I just wanted to put my 2 cents in that I hope that there will continue to be processes for communities to give input into how those funds are allocated based on either surveys or other things, tools in terms of the needs that the community needs. And I'm talking about holistically for the community, all aspects. So thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. We'll definitely work on that.
Thank you.
Amy, would you like to ask your question live?
Hi, sorry. Yeah, well, I guess so. My question is just, that was really helpful and informative. And just in terms of planning, I just wondering what the deadlines are for applying for funds for the second tranche.
Are you specifically interested in the summer program or the after school programs? Or?
After school programs, but for the school year.
Right. We're in the process of putting together the schedule for the program, the after school programs. And we anticipate, as I mentioned, we're going to be going to the board, I think it's July 28th
Right.
for approval. We anticipate opening the applications shortly thereafter. And we would hope to have the money out by early September. So applications would open probably early August, 1st of August.
Okay.
And we will definitely share, as we have in the past, share all the application information as soon as it's available with Georgia so she can distribute it to all of you.
Thank you.
Quick question for me, well, maybe not that quick, Peggy, but I know that, it was great to see that one of the funding principles is around kind of pilots and experimentation that the Gardner Center and Shireen had helped develop. And I know a lot has been sort of invested in workforce development broadly. I think for nonprofits right now, it's been kind of identified as workforce development is an existential crisis. That's what one of our partners has called it for nonprofits. So that's probably the #1 issue facing our nonprofits right now is recruitment and retention. We know there's some pilots in sort of the child care space, some in mental health, but it feels like there's an opportunity for something more comprehensive around workforce development for nonprofits broadly. And just wanted to get your feedback on that, on a potential pilot around that maybe is more specifically focused on nonprofits and their sustainability. So I think the last part to that is that we often think about the sustainability of, like, I think the for-profit community, but I think when we think about nonprofits, we think about the service delivery. So it would be great to think about partnering on something related to workforce development, but specifically for nonprofits. So just wanted your thoughts on that. And maybe there is something happening that, you know, I'm not aware of.
So Georgia, thank you for the question. We'd be happy to entertain a proposal around for-profit pipeline development, staffing pipeline development. I would say that everyone we've talked to has this challenge, whether it's the public sector, the private sector, nonprofit sector. We are developing a program. In fact, we're going to be getting shortly back from David Fleischman and his team a proposal around specifically for the childcare community and developing a pipeline for folks. That's a very collaborative effort that will be engaging lots of different folks, from the community colleges to the providers, everyone. But yeah, we'd be happy to see a proposal from you all. And I think it would be a value, actually, and I'm just kind of off the top of my head, I think it would be a value getting people from a variety of different sectors together to talk about this challenge and just share ideas, because you know, the county we're having higher turnover than we've ever had before. We're having more difficulty filling positions, finding qualified applicants than we ever have before, and we're having to think creatively in a lot of different ways. So I'll certainly take that back to our team, both for nonprofits, but maybe as a thought of how do we all come together to share the challenges we face and what can we do all together.
Great, thank you.
Lauren, do you want to ask that question live?
Sure. So I was just wondering, in terms of learning about these future opportunities as the unallocated funds become available, what the best way is to remain aware of those opportunities. And I thought I'd heard someone mention that Thrive might be informing us via email. We just want to make sure we know about them.
Sure, thank you for the question, Lauren. Our major grant programs, we've all announced on the SMC Strong website, and applications are available through that website. But we also, like I said, will share things with Georgia. We try to reach out to people and if you've ever applied for a grant before, we would probably let you know, but we use all sorts of community resources for that. But I would suggest keeping track of our SMC Strong website, you know, the board agenda. With the exception of the money for about $6 million I mentioned, we're going to have to go back to the board for approval to allocate and run the programs, the other types of programs we've talked about. So again, board agendas would be helpful. And I don't know, Georgia and Petra, do you track those and identify programs for your folks to promote that?
Yes, and I just put in the chat. We have our Thrive Weekly, and so Peggy, you've been sending us, you know, RFP information, and we've made sure to distribute it through there, and also through our policy and advocacy newsletter and our Thrive Star newsletter. So the team will include links to that in case many of you are on our newsletters. That's why you're here. And so, but if you haven't signed up, we'll include links, and we are tracking all of that information. And then we, you know, Peggy, we appreciate that you continue to send it to us directly as well.
Yeah, and I know, Georgia, that we've had some Q&A sessions around some programs. We're happy to continue to do that if that's of interest.
It also lives on our website with links. So you can find it there. And the best newsletter to be on if you want information like this is our Thrive Weekly. So it'll definitely come out in that. So if you're on one of our other email lists, but not on that one, you should jump on that one. And you can feel free to just email one of us to get on that email list. Anybody else have any questions? If not, we can thank Peggy so much for sharing her time and these opportunities and all of the information. And thank you to everyone who's here. because we really appreciate the community. And with that, you can have 15 minutes back of your day unexpectedly.
We will be
So-
sending out the PowerPoint, which is really informative, and also links for you to sign up for all kinds of Thrive items. So thank you. Thanks, Peggy. Thank you, everyone. Great to see you all. And we'll keep the room open for a little bit longer in case you want to stick around. But thank you so much, Peggy. We appreciate your time.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Thrive. Thank you, Peggy.
Thank you.